Your gut has a hidden cleaning crew working every day, but your daily habits may be silently shutting it down. Something inside your body has been trying to clean itself for years, and you may have been unknowingly stopping it every single day. That realization hit me harder than any health advice I had ever heard. Not because it was complicated, but because it was so simple and so easy to miss. For most of my life, I believed digestion worked like a conveyor belt. You eat food, your body processes it, and everything keeps moving forward. That was the model I carried in my head: logical, mechanical, predictable. But then, there were days when my own body started sending signals I couldn't ignore. I would eat what I thought was a healthy meal, drink enough water, try to stay active, yet by mid-afternoon, my stomach felt swollen, my mind felt cloudy, and my energy seemed to drain without warning. It was as if something inside me was struggling quietly, asking for help in a language I didn't understand. Out of curiosity, and honestly, a little frustration, I began digging deeper into the biology of the gut. That is when I discovered a mechanism most people never hear about, even though it has been working inside them since the day they were born. Scientists call it the migrating motor complex. The name sounds technical, but the idea is surprisingly human. Imagine a city after a long, busy day. Streets are crowded, debris is scattered, and the only thing that restores order is the quiet crew that comes out when everything else stops. Their job is not glamorous. They do not deliver goods or build new structures. They simply clean. Your small intestine has a crew just like that. But here is the rule that changed the way I see my daily habits. The cleaning crew only comes out when the street is empty. Biologically, that means your stomach must remain empty long enough for this natural wave of movement to begin. And once it starts, it sweeps through the intestine, pushing leftover particles and bacteria forward so the system can reset. The unsettling part is not that this system exists. The unsettling part is realizing how rarely we allow it to work. That discovery led me to a question I couldn't shake. If my body has a cleaning crew, then what exactly is living inside the system they are trying to protect every day? The more I explored that question, the more my understanding of the human body began to shift. I stopped seeing digestion as a mechanical process and started seeing it as something alive, dynamic, delicate, and deeply interconnected. It felt less like operating a machine and more like tending a landscape. Inside the gut lives a community so vast that it is almost difficult to comprehend. Trillions of microorganisms, each with its own role, each responding to the environment we create through our daily choices. For years, I carried the old belief that bacteria were simply enemies to fight off. But biology tells a much more interesting story. Many of these organisms are not invaders. They are collaborators. They help break down fibers our own bodies cannot digest, produce compounds that calm inflammation, and even send signals that influence our mood and energy. What fascinated me most was realizing that this internal world behaves very much like a garden. And like any garden, its strength depends on diversity. Not abundance of one thing, but variety of many. I remember reading about large-scale research that compared thousands of diets across different populations. Scientists expected that healthier people simply ate more vegetables. But the pattern that emerged was more subtle and more powerful. The healthiest microbiomes were found in people who consumed a wide range of plant foods, dozens of different types over the course of a single week. At first, that idea felt overwhelming. 30 different plants sounded unrealistic. But then, I looked closer at my own meals and realized how narrow my habits had become. The same ingredients repeated again and again, the same flavors, the same routines. And that was the moment I understood something quietly profound. Health is not always about eating more. Sometimes it is about expanding your environment, creating a richer ecosystem inside your own body, one small choice at a time. That realization about diversity opened another door in my mind. because I began to wonder whether health was shaped not only by what we eat, but by the rhythm in which we live. For years, my evenings followed a pattern that felt completely normal. Work would run late, dinner would drift later, and sometimes I would find myself standing in the kitchen at 9 or 10 at night, eating quickly while scrolling through messages. I told myself it didn't matter. Calories were calories, food was food. As long as I chose something healthy, the timing seemed irrelevant. But biology has a way of challenging our assumptions. The deeper I looked into how the body processes energy, the more I realized that digestion is not a 24-hour operation running at the same speed all day. It follows a daily rhythm, just like sleep, body temperature, and hormone release. In the morning and early afternoon, the system is alert, responsive, and efficient. Enzymes are active, cells are ready to absorb nutrients. Blood sugar is handled more smoothly, the body is prepared for work. As darkness approaches, that readiness gradually fades. I like to picture it as a workplace winding down at the end of the day. Lights dim, fewer people remain, tasks still get done, but everything takes longer. Now imagine placing the heaviest workload of the day right at closing time. The job doesn't stop, it simply becomes harder, slower, and more stressful for the system. That is what late-night eating can feel like from the perspective of the body. Food lingers in the stomach longer, energy regulation becomes less stable. Sleep becomes lighter and more fragmented. And the next morning often begins with subtle fatigue that we struggle to explain. What struck me most was how small adjustments could create meaningful change. Not extreme diets, not complicated rules. Just a consistent window of time for eating, followed by a long stretch of rest for the body to recover and reset. In that moment, I began to see health less as a battle of willpower and more as a quiet partnership with time itself. That partnership with time taught me something important, but it also exposed a deeper truth. Even when the schedule is right, the body can still refuse to cooperate if the mind is under pressure. I began to notice this during some of the busiest seasons of my life. I would sit down with a perfectly balanced meal, prepared with care, eaten at a reasonable hour, and yet my stomach still felt tight afterward. There was a heaviness that didn't match the food on my plate. It felt as if my body had received the meal, but never truly welcomed it. That confusion pushed me to look beyond nutrition and timing and into something more subtle, the wiring of the nervous system. What I learned changed the way I understand stress. Not the dramatic kind we imagine, but the quiet, constant tension that builds throughout the day. The unanswered emails, the deadlines, the background worries that never fully leave the mind. To us, these feel manageable, but to the body, they can look like danger. Biology responds to danger in a very predictable way. It shifts resources towards survival. Blood flows to the muscles. Breathing becomes shallow. The heart beats faster, and digestion, which requires patience and energy, is temporarily placed on hold. This response made perfect sense thousands of years ago, when threats were physical and immediate. But in modern life, the threats are often psychological, and they linger. We carry them into our meals without realizing it. The most surprising discovery for me was that digestion does not truly begin in the stomach, it begins in the brain. There is a communication pathway connecting the two, a nerve that constantly listens for signals of safety or threat. When the body senses calm, digestion flows naturally. When it senses tension, the process slows. What gave me hope was how responsive this system can be. A few slow breaths before eating, a brief pause to settle the mind, can gently shift the body back into a state where nourishment is possible. It is a small act, almost invisible from the outside, but it can completely change the experience happening within. That realization about the nervous system brought me a sense of control, but it also led me to confront a more uncomfortable question. What if some of the damage to our gut is not caused by what we forget to do, but by what we are unknowingly adding every single day? I remember standing in a grocery store one afternoon, looking at rows of fresh produce and bottled water, feeling confident that I was making healthy choices. Everything looked clean, modern, and safe. Yet the deeper I explored the science of the microbiome, the more I began to understand that health is not only shaped by what we consume intentionally, but also by the invisible exposures that accumulate quietly over time. One of the most striking examples is the use of antibiotics. These medications are among the greatest achievements in modern medicine, and in many situations they save lives. But they are also powerful tools, and like any powerful tool, their effects extend beyond the immediate problem they are meant to solve. When antibiotics enter the body, they do not distinguish between harmful bacteria and beneficial ones. They clear space quickly, sometimes too quickly, leaving the internal ecosystem temporarily unbalanced. Recovery is possible, but it takes time, patience, and the right environment for diversity to grow again. Then, there are the smaller exposures that rarely cross our minds: traces of pesticides on food, chemicals designed to protect crops, or the disinfectants used to keep public water supplies safe. These systems exist for good reasons, and they play an important role in protecting communities. Yet from a biological perspective, constant low-level exposure can still influence the delicate balance of microbes living inside us. This realization did not make me fearful, it made me more attentive. Health, I began to see, is less about perfection and more about protection. Washing produce carefully, choosing higher quality ingredients when possible, using simple filtration to reduce unnecessary residues. These are not extreme actions. They are quiet decisions that create a safer environment for the body to repair itself. And what reassured me most through this entire journey was discovering how resilient the human body truly is. Given the right conditions, time, balance, and a little care, it has an extraordinary ability to recover, renew, and keep moving forward. In the end, the lesson that stayed with me is surprisingly simple. The body is not asking for perfection, it is asking for cooperation. Health is rarely built through dramatic changes or expensive solutions. It grows from small, consistent decisions that respect how biology actually works, giving your system time to rest, feeding it variety, aligning with natural rhythms, calming your mind before meals, and reducing unnecessary exposures. These habits may look ordinary from the outside, but over time, they create resilience, steady energy, and clarity that you can feel in everyday life. So now I'm curious about you. Which one of these habits do you think is the hardest to maintain in your daily routine right now? I'd truly appreciate it if you shared your thoughts in the comments, so we can learn from each other's experiences. And if this exploration of science and real-life health has been helpful to you, consider subscribing to the channel to support us and keep this journey of discovery going together.